Hello Internet. In today's video we're starting a new series on Shopify Hydrogen security tips, and the first one we want to look at is how to secure our API keys, and namely how not to leak them into the client. And what do I mean by that? Well, in a previous video we looked at how to handle environment variables in Shopify Hydrogen project, and if you are familiar with Shopify Hydrogen, you know by now that Shopify Hydrogen uses the Remix framework underneath, okay? And if we go in the Remix documentation and in the browser environment variable section of the documentation, you see this line here. It is easy to accidentally leak secrets into publicly accessible files, and this is not a Remix specific problem. Every framework or every project you work on, every web framework web project you work on, if you're not careful, it's very easy to leak secret information to the client bundle. And by client bundle we mean the application itself, because remember, Remix is a full stack framework, so some parts of your code run on the server and other parts of your code run on the client. For example, in this case here, the loader has access to environment variables, and remember, from if you didn't watch, this way of accessing environment variables in Shopify Hydrogen does not work. And just to recap what we studied in the previous video, this will not work, and the reason is this is the way to access environment variables in a Node.js server environment, in a Node.js runtime like Express. But Cloudflare Workers, which powers Shopify Oxygen, it's not a Node runtime. It's based on V8, okay? So the way to get access to your environment variables is to do context.env.name of the environment variable instead, okay? And that presumes that you have added the environment variable to your context when defining the getLoad context here, okay? So you have your execution context, you have your environment variable bindings, okay? Which are, remember, Shopify Oxygen or Cloudflare Workers is a serverless environment. So every time a request is created, a function is created on the edge to execute that function, okay? And before running that function, a bunch of context and bindings are injected as dependencies into the function, okay, into the fetch function like you see here. And among those injections are the environment variables, right? Are the environment variables here. So you need to get access to make sure that in the upload context, meaning when you're now in your loader, you have access to those environment variables. You need to send them here like this, which means you have to add them to the upload context type here or interface here like this, okay? And in your env, this is what you have access to, okay? These are all the environment variables you want to have access to in your env here like that, okay? So coming back to the issue with security, although the loader runs only on the server, okay? So if you do a console log of this, you can see that we have access to the foobar, the secret that is defined in the .env file, okay? This session secret here, if we do a console log as we're doing here, we have access to that. But we have access to a lot more than just this, okay? Let me show you. If I do like this and I remove this here, you can see that we have a lot more. We have access to a lot more than just what I showed you there before. So I will refresh here. Okay, you see, we have access to plenty of environment variables that are injected by Miniflare, or in our case Mini Oxygen. Just something like the Stripe secret key here, right? It's accessible here in the loader. But you're going to tell me, and write this up, well, wait, this is not the browser environment, this is the server environment, so it's perfectly safe to do this. And I would say you're right, but only 50%, because, and that's the point that's being made here, it is easy to accidentally leak this into publicly accessible files. So again, if we look at the console logs, obviously we won't see that there for now, right? We don't see that those env. But what happens, okay, if we hire a new developer and he is not aware that within this context the environment variables are there, right? He doesn't know that, right? He doesn't, he's still consuming the code base, he's still getting familiar with the project, he doesn't know that. So and for instance, he may want to have access to some publicly facing environment variables like this one, right? So he may naively, or due to inexperience, do like this: return the context from the loader into your component, and all of a sudden the context is now accessible from your component. Because if you do a console log here like this, right, now you can see that the context is now here, you see, and exposing everything including your Stripe key. Dangerous, right? As you can see here, this is extremely dangerous. We definitely never ever want to do that, right? So now that we have exposed the problem, what is the solution? Okay, because we never want to accidentally leak our Stripe key or any other secret information away and have it into the client like this, because it's now accessible in the client, right? So what we want to do is very simple. The solution is very simple. We want to make sure that when we are passing from the server land into the client land, or when you're passing from this server file, anything that we inject into the loaders here is stripped down from everything that is server or anything that is sensitive. So instead of passing every environment variables like we're doing here, it is a good idea to define a variable here called const public env, okay? And from there we get these publicly facing environments, and then we just add them like this, env.public, and what we do here is we return them like this from here, you see, very simple. And then if I do the same thing, I close this and I refresh, you see that now the only thing we have access to is public store domain, which is excellent, right? We are no longer in our loaders or our components. We no longer have access to all those environment variables that are, including the ones that are very sensitive. And we can even go one step further, and in terms of security, you're never too secure, right? You want to go one step further, because someone can by accident define something here. If you come here and you add, let's say Stripe key like that. If I go and get it here like this and I add it here, Stripe key, okay, and I refresh, you see that it's back, right? That sensitive information is back in the client environment, right? Which we obviously don't want, okay? So how do we mitigate that how do we add that extra line of security? Well, it's by using runtime validation, okay? So we want to make sure that we have let's say I've created a file here called env schema, okay? So this is a file, Zod. First of all, in order to have access to this, you have to install the Zod package, which is a very popular runtime validation, schema validation framework or library in the JavaScript ecosystem. So when we add that package, now we define publicly facing, and by publicly I mean anything that is safe to run both on the client and on the server, and server only environment variables. And now we have a schema here. What we do, we copy that schema, okay, or we import that schema in our server.ts, and what we do is this, okay? So we do like this, and then we do parse dot env, okay, public env, okay. So I'm gonna change the name here, maybe public env like this, because otherwise they have the same name, and I define it like this here, okay? Or I can simply, even very simply, do it like this. All right, very simple, and it's gonna add one more extra layer of security. So if I go back to my app, I refresh like this, you see now again we're just back to just that one variable that is publicly facing. And why is this a better solution? Is because here you have the like it's centralized, like it's easy to, like in your code review process to see if anyone has added anything to this, and yeah, it makes it centralized, so everywhere we need to remove anything else that doesn't belong to the that shouldn't leak into the client is done by this object here, is defined here. And every time we need access to server only secret, we can use this here to abstract that from the to remove that from the .env here that is defined in the server.ts, because as you saw, it has a lot more than just the things we need, right? It has a lot more. Let me go again at that console log and see what is in there. You see, it has all those things here. So if we need to have the server environment variables, all we have to do is come here like this, the same way we did for the public ones. Okay, so we're gonna do server const server env server env. Let's do like this, server env vars. I'm gonna do server env. Let me copy that. Server env. Is it not secret? I call it secret. Sorry, secret env. Okay, and then I do pass, and then env. Okay, env. And then if I do a console log here for you to see what is there, you're gonna see server envars. Okay, if I log this, you see that it's no longer that gigantic list of environment variables. It's just the things we need. Okay, so it's always nice to do a need to know thing on a need to know basis. Your application doesn't need to know everything else like that. Just remove everything that's unnecessary and just give your application context the things it needs to know. And in the case of loaders, a good practice that we have at LiftedCommerce when you're building client projects is to make sure that the loaders never see anything that is server related. And you will ask me like, well, if I need to make queries from my loaders, well, I need access to environment variables. Well, right, you do, but what we do as a good practice, we wrap everything that needs access to server related environment variables in a service. And this is an example of that being done here by the Shopify CLI. So the storefront API obviously is making queries that could be, imagine this was a secret API. Okay, because I think the storefront API is a publicly facing API, but imagine this was an API that was hidden behind an API key. Okay, you are making authenticated queries, so when you're instantiating your service here, then and then only you pass in the key, and that's what they're doing here. You see, they're doing it here, so that prevents you from having to instantiate the client in your application code like this. Okay, so you don't need to pass in the keys into the loaders for the sake of creating this object. You create those objects here and you pass them already authenticated into your application code, and then you keep your loaders free from environment variables leaks. And I hope you found this video useful, and this is the first installment of a lot more to come on how to secure your Shopify Hydrogen storefront. I hope you found this useful, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel because there's a lot more like this to come. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Ciao.